My cousin didn't just steal my inheritance. She turned my grandmother's death into her personal jackpot, and tonight was supposed to be her victory lap. I stood at the edge of my aunt's backyard, fingers resting on the small flash drive in my pocket, watching my family laugh under strings of warm patio lights. To anyone else, it probably looked like a normal family reunion. Kids chasing each other with glow sticks, uncles arguing over football, someone burning burgers on the grill. But I wasn't there for the food, or the fake hugs, or the "we should do this more often" lies. I was there for one reason: to finally expose how my cousin stole what my grandmother left for me, and how the rest of them helped her pretend it was just how the will worked out. I spotted her near the drinks table, laughing with my parents like she hadn't rewritten my future with a single signature. New designer dress, glittering necklace, perfectly styled hair. Funny how fast people glow up when they suddenly inherit a house, a savings account, and a very specific investment portfolio that was never supposed to be theirs. "Oh my God, you made it!" She rushed over, arms open, perfume hitting me before she did. To everyone watching, it probably looked like a sweet reunion between two close cousins. To me, it felt like being hugged by the person who picked my pocket at a funeral and then sent me a thank you card. In my head, I could still hear her voice from a year ago, crackling through the phone the night after Grandma's funeral. "The lawyer said this is just how she structured it. I didn't ask for any of this, you know. Please don't make it weird." Back then, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe my family wouldn't cut me out on purpose. So I stayed quiet. I swallowed my questions. I let them gaslight me with phrases like, "Grandma knew what she was doing," and "it's just easier this way." What they didn't know was that staying quiet doesn't mean you stopped paying attention. While they were busy redecorating Grandma's house and posting inspirational quotes about family on Facebook, I was collecting emails, texts, bank screenshots, and every tiny inconsistency in their story. That little flash drive in my pocket, it held more than just files. It held dates that didn't line up, signatures that looked a little too perfect, and one very important document showing exactly what Grandma's original will was supposed to say. So when my aunt tapped her spoon against a glass and called everyone over for a special thank you to the person who carried on Mum's legacy, I knew exactly what was coming. "Everyone, can we gather around for a moment?" Chairs scraped. Conversations faded. My cousin stepped forward, already wearing that humble little smile she'd practiced in every mirror in this house. I wrapped my hand around the flash drive, feeling the sharp edge press into my palm. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't second-guessing. I was calm. Because before I tell you how I ruined that little speech, and how I made my entire family watch the truth on a 40-inch TV they bought with my inheritance, you need to understand exactly how we got here. Let's rewind to the moment I first realized something about Grandma's new will didn't add up. Before the backyard, before the flash drive, there was just me and Grandma June at her tiny kitchen table. Her real name was Evelyn, but everyone called her June because she said that was the only month that ever felt hopeful. I grew up in that house, falling asleep to the sound of her old TV and the smell of laundry detergent and apple pie. My cousin, her name is Marissa, by the way, didn't visit as much when we were kids. She had the fun parents with the big SUV and the all-inclusive vacations. I had the mum who worked double shifts and dropped me off at Grandma's so the lights would stay on. One night, when I was maybe 16, Grandma slid a manila envelope across the table. The TV was on mute, some crime show flashing blue and red across the walls. "I went to see a lawyer," she said. "Don't make that face. I'm old, not immortal. Inside the envelope was paperwork I barely understood. Legalese, addresses, words like executor and residuary estate. I remember my name, underlined, next to a description of the house. "You're the one who lives here," she said. "You help me shovel snow, fix the Wi-Fi, yell at the scammers who call about my car warranty. It makes sense that this place is yours when I'm gone." I told her I didn't care about the house, that I just wanted her to be around forever. She smiled, touched my hand, and said something I will never forget. "Fair isn't always equal, but I will never let anyone leave you with nothing." She wasn't rich. The estate was a paid-off house, a modest savings account, and some conservative investments she'd nurtured like plants. But to me, it was security, a promise that after spending my whole childhood feeling like backup, I wouldn't have to start my adult life from zero. Years later, when my mum casually mentioned that Grandma had updated some paperwork after a hospital scare, I thought back to that envelope, that underlined line with my name, that sentence about never leaving me with nothing. So when people tell me I was just entitled or jealous about the inheritance, I want you to remember this. I didn't invent expectations out of thin air. My grandmother made a promise. And she documented it. Which is why, on the day of her funeral, when I heard the phrase, "Your grandmother signed a new will," something in my chest went ice cold. The day we buried Grandma June felt blurred at the edges, like someone had smeared my life with their thumb. Too many casseroles. Too many people saying, "If you need anything, let us know," knowing they didn't mean it. After the service, a few of us gathered in Aunt Carol's living room. Mum, Dad, Aunt Carol, Marissa, and me. There was a man I didn't recognize sitting in Grandma's favorite armchair, holding a thin folder. "This is Mr. Klein," my mother said. "Your grandmother's attorney." He cleared his throat, did the whole "I'm sorry for your loss" routine, then slid a few pages out of the folder. I remember the rustle of paper sounding louder than it should have. The will he read didn't sound like the envelope from Grandma's kitchen. The house, the savings, most of what she had, in recognition of her devotion as primary caregiver, were now left to Marissa. I wasn't mentioned by name until a small line near the bottom. "I am confident that my granddaughter will be able to support herself with her education and future career." No specific asset, no percentage, nothing concrete. Mr. Klein added, almost as an afterthought, that this document had been signed approximately 6 months ago after a hospital stay to better reflect June's wishes. 6 months ago, Grandma had texted me angry emojis because the hospital food was an insult to soup. She'd also called me one evening to complain that Marissa only shows up when there's something to post about. Grandma's text that week: "If I have to change my will again, I'm charging admission. People treat me like a prize machine." But now, according to Mr. Klein, she had apparently decided that the granddaughter who lived with her for years should get a pat on the head, while the one who visited when she could would inherit the place where every photo on my phone was taken. Mum squeezed my knee, like she could feel the questions boiling behind my eyes. "Honey, you got your degree," she whispered. "This is better for everyone. Marissa will keep the house in the family. Don't start a fight today." I didn't start a fight. I sat there, nodding, watching Marissa pretend to wipe a tear while she clutched the folder like it was a golden ticket. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding. Maybe there was a second account somewhere. Maybe Grandma had changed her mind and just forgotten to tell me. But grief has a way of muting your instincts. So I pushed the ice-cold feeling down, hugged everyone, and went home. The gaslighting didn't start until the phone calls in the weeks that followed. The first call came 3 days after the funeral. I was back at work, answering emails on autopilot, when my phone lit up with Marissa's name. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, breathy. "I just wanted to check in on you. I know the will stuff was a lot." Before I could answer, she rushed on. "I didn't ask Grandma for anything, okay? The lawyer said this is just how she structured it. I feel really guilty, honestly." She sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced those exact sentences in the mirror. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told her I wasn't mad. It was only half a lie. The second wave came from my parents. Every conversation somehow circled back to how Grandma wanted peace and fighting over money ruins families. Mom reminded me that Grandma had helped with my tuition. Dad pointed out that I didn't even like the neighborhood and had talked about moving cities anyway. Whenever I asked simple questions, when exactly was the will changed? Who called the lawyer? Why no one told me beforehand? The answers got real fuzzy, real fast. "Honey, Grandma was sick," Mum sighed over the phone. "She didn't owe anyone a board meeting. She probably didn't want to burden you." Marissa's favorite line, "Please don't make it weird. I already feel like everyone thinks I stole something." That's the thing about being the reasonable one in a family full of dramatics. You get trained to manage everyone else's comfort before your own reality. So I stayed quiet. I sent polite texts. I liked Marissa's Instagram posts of Grandma's kitchen, my happy place now, and her selfies on the porch swing I had helped install in college. On the outside, I played along. On the inside, something kept snagging. A date that didn't feel right. A phrase in that will. The memory of that envelope with my name underlined. I wish I could tell you I immediately turned into some unstoppable legal avenger. I didn't. I went back to work, paid my rent, cried in the shower sometimes. But then, a few months later, a plain white envelope showed up in my mailbox that didn't look like junk and didn't sound like sympathy. It sounded like math. And math, unlike my family, doesn't lie. The envelope was from the county assessor's office. I almost tossed it on the counter with the rest of the boring adult mail, but the return address caught my eye. My grandmother's street. Inside was a copy of the new property tax statement, plus a generic letter explaining that recent changes in ownership could affect assessed value. Someone, somewhere, hadn't updated all their mailing preferences yet. Right there, in black and white, was the line that made my brain go quiet. Date of transfer. The house had been transferred into Marissa's name 3 weeks before Grandma died. Not after the funeral. Not after some peaceful family meeting. While Grandma was still alive, in and out of the hospital, texting me about bad soup. The letter didn't care about anyone's feelings. It just listed numbers, parcel IDs, and effective dates. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the same way I had at Grandma's, and read that line over and over. Transfer recorded. Fee simple. Grantee. Marissa Cole. I took a picture of the letter with my phone. Then I emailed it to myself. Then I dragged it into a new folder on my laptop called House Stuff, Facts. That was the first time I did something other than just feel hurt. I documented. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't call Marissa screaming. I just saved the paper. Later that night, I opened the county recorder's website, the one Grandma used to complain about when she paid property taxes online. It turned out, for a small fee, You could download copies of recorded deeds. Curiosity 1. I typed in the parcel number, paid the fee, downloaded the PDF. A few seconds later, I was staring at a scanned document with my grandmother's shaky signature on it, notarized on a date I knew for a fact she'd been barely conscious in a hospital bed. That was the exact moment I stopped wondering if I was overreacting and started wondering how deep this actually went. The deed I downloaded was one of those bland legal forms you'd never look twice at unless you had a reason. A quitclaim deed, transferring the house from Grandma June to Marissa for valuable consideration. The consideration listed? $10. $10 for the house my grandmother spent 40 years paying off on a receptionist's salary. The signature line made my skin crawl. Grandma's handwriting, wobbly but still recognizable, dated the same week she'd been hooked up to machines, according to the hospital bracelet I'd saved in a drawer. The notary stamp was from a mobile service. The time on the acknowledgement didn't match visiting hours. I started collecting small, unglamorous receipts of reality, screenshots of text messages, discharge paperwork with dates and times, calendar reminders from when I'd visited the hospital. Then, instead of confronting anyone on the phone where words vanish into the air, I sent a simple email to my mum, Aunt Carol, and Marissa. Hey, I got a copy of the deed from the county website. For my own peace of mind, can someone please send me a full copy of Grandma's current will, including the signature page? I'd like to understand the timeline. Thank you. Mum replied first. Sweetie, why are you doing this? It's just going to stir up drama. Grandma knew what she wanted. Aunt Carol. You're overthinking this. Mr. Klein has everything on file. We don't keep that stuff lying around. Marissa. I honestly don't have it. The lawyer handled everything. I wish you'd trust me instead of acting like I did something wrong. None of them actually answered the question. Not one of them wrote, "Here is a scanned copy of the will." I forwarded all 3 emails into the House Stuff Facts folder. No replies, just evidence. That night, I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I made an appointment with a probate attorney who wasn't connected to my family at all. If they weren't going to give me straight answers, I was going to pay someone whose job it was to explain what the paperwork really meant. Attorney Angela Brown's office was on the 4th floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind with creaky elevators and framed degrees on the wall. I showed up with a tote bag full of paper, the tax notice, printouts of the deed, screenshots of texts, a copy of the funeral program, even my grandmother's hospital bracelet. Angela was in her 40s, calm eyes, no-nonsense posture. She didn't say, "I'm so sorry," more than once. Instead, she said, "Walk me through this from the beginning, and don't leave out the parts you think are too emotional." I told her about Grandma's envelope, the promise about the house, the new will after the funeral, the quitclaim deed, the transfer date, the unanswered emails. She listened without interrupting. Every so often she circled something on the deed or wrote a date on a yellow legal pad. "Here's what I see," she said finally. "You may be looking at undue influence, possibly lack of capacity, and at minimum, a very suspicious transfer of real property right before death." She explained that wills and deeds aren't just vibes. There are rules. People need to understand what they're signing. Transfers can be challenged if someone took advantage of a vulnerable person. "Do you want to sue your family?" she asked, looking me straight in the eye. The truth? I didn't know. I didn't want a courtroom montage. I wanted my reality acknowledged. I wanted the story they were telling about me. Jealous, bitter, ungrateful. To stop being the only version in circulation. Before we talk about litigation, Angela said, let's talk about leverage. Right now, the only people who know the facts are you, me, and whoever helped arrange this transfer. Information is power. So is documentation. She gave me homework. Request Grandma's full medical records for the month before the transfer. Write a certified letter to Mr. Klein asking for a complete copy of the will file. Keep all responses in writing. Don't argue on the phone, she said. If it's not written down, it's deniable. Let them talk themselves into a corner with their own words. I walked out of her office still sad, still grieving, but a little less crazy. Not because anything had been fixed yet, but because, for the first time, someone had looked at the same papers I had and said, "You're not imagining this." The next few weeks didn't look dramatic from the outside. I still went to work, still bought groceries, still sent the occasional "hope you're well" text to keep everyone calm. But in the background, a folder on my laptop kept filling up. I sent a certified letter to Mr. Klein's office, using the exact wording Angela suggested. Formal request for a complete copy of all executed testamentary documents bearing June Holloway's signature. His paralegal responded by email. At this time, we are unable to provide copies directly to you without the consent of the executor. Please address any questions to the family representative. The family representatives, of course, was Marissa. The same person who kept insisting she didn't have anything. I forwarded the email to Angela and moved it into the folder. Another brick. I requested Grandma's hospital records for the week the deed was signed. When the packet arrived, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor with a highlighter, tracing the timeline. On the day the mobile notary claimed to have witnessed her signature at home, the nurse's notes said she was confused, disoriented, and on full precautions. She hadn't even been discharged yet. Meanwhile, Marissa's social media told a different story. Aesthetic photos of paint swatches, turning Grandma's old house into my dream space, and captions about honoring her legacy with brand new stainless steel appliances. I screenshot everything, not to be petty, but because dates matter. Demo Day, posted the same week my grandmother was still on oxygen. Every time I felt myself getting sucked into the emotional part, the betrayal, the unfairness, the smallness of knowing my memories were now someone else's aesthetic. I went back to the folder, to the facts. One night, Angela called after reviewing the latest documents. "You have a case," she said. "If this goes to court, we can at least get them to the table. But I want you to think carefully about what outcome you actually want." I stared at the open folder on my screen. Deeds, medical notes, emails, screenshots. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the story my family had been telling, that I was overreacting, ungrateful, dramatic, versus the story the documents told. And that's when the invitation to the family reunion landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Family BBQ at the house. Grandma would have loved this." In the body, Aunt Carol wrote about celebrating Mom's legacy, how Marissa had worked so hard to keep the home warm and welcoming, and how it would mean a lot if everyone came together. I stared at the email for a long time. On one hand, the idea of walking into that house as a guest made my stomach twist. On the other hand, there's a certain poetry in people being confronted with the truth in the exact setting where they've been lying to themselves. I forwarded the invite to Angela with one line. "Hypothetically, if I wanted to lay out the facts in front of everyone at once, any reason I shouldn't?" She called instead of emailing. "I can't tell you how to handle your family," she said, "but I will tell you this. Anything you present should be accurate, clear. and something you'd be comfortable handing to a judge. So that's what I worked on. I spent evenings turning my messy folder into a simple, brutal timeline. Dates, screenshots, document excerpts, all arranged in order. No commentary, no insults, just, on this day, this happened. I added a few photos of Grandma and me, her handwriting on birthday cards, a picture of that manila envelope on her table. Not to manipulate, but to remind everyone this wasn't theoretical. It was a real person being rewritten posthumously to justify someone else's greed. When the slideshow was done, I loaded it onto a small flash drive and labeled it June Real Story. I also did something very boring and very important. I took photos of the flash drive itself, front and back, and emailed them to myself with the date and time. If anyone later claimed I doctored things afterward, I wanted a time-stamped baseline. Then I RSVP'd yes to the reunion. No exclamation marks, no emojis, just yes. That's how we ended up back in Aunt Carol's backyard, with the patio lights and the burgers, and my hand resting on that flash drive, waiting for the exact moment to change the story they'd been telling for a year. Which brings us back to the sound of a spoon tapping a glass, and my aunt calling everyone over for a special thank you. Aunt Carol's spoon chimed against the side of her wineglass, and conversations slowly faded into a low hum. Folding chairs scraped against the patio. The kids were shushed. I stayed near the back, close enough to see everyone, far enough that no one could accuse me of dramatically inserting myself. Marissa stood next to the outdoor TV mounted on the brick wall, the same one she used for game nights, now framed in fairy lights. She was glowing. New dress, fresh tan, that humble smile she'd perfected. Earlier, I'd offered to help set up the playlist for background music. She'd handed me the remote without hesitation. I'd already paired my laptop to the TV, queued up the slideshow, and minimized it behind a boring Spotify window. "Thank you all for coming," Aunt Carol began, voice trembling just enough to feel sincere. "Mum would be so happy to see us all together in her backyard." People murmur agreed. Someone dabbed their eyes. I felt my jaw clench when she put a hand on Marissa's shoulder. "I especially want to thank Marissa," she went on, "for everything she's done to preserve this place. She took on so much responsibility when Mum got sick. Handling the paperwork, dealing with the lawyer, making sure the house stayed in the family. I watched my parents nod along. I watched cousins raise their plastic cups. I watched Marissa bow her head, modest and radiant, as if she hadn't quietly erased an entire promise from history. My hand tightened around the remote in my pocket. One button press and the TV would stop being a decoration and start being a witness. "To family," Aunt Carol said, lifting her glass. "To loyalty, and to the ones who step up when it's hardest." That was my cue. I stepped forward, not dramatic, not storming. Just enough that people noticed there was someone else standing near the glowing TV. "Aunt Carol," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Would it be okay if I shared something Grandma left behind too? It's for everyone." A few heads turned. My mom looked nervous. Marissa's smile flickered, just for a second. There's a special kind of silence that falls when a TV screen suddenly turns blue at a family gathering. It's the sound of every conversation pausing at the exact same time. I clicked the remote. The Spotify window shrank. The title slide filled the screen. A photo of Grandma June on her porch swing, with the words, "What really happened with the house," in simple white letters. A few people laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. Aunt Carol's smile froze. Marissa's hand flew to her necklace, twisting it hard enough I thought it might snap. "This isn't an attack," I said, letting my eyes move slowly across the group. "I just realized most of you have only heard one version of this story. Grandma told me another one." And she left a paper trail. The next slide appeared. A screenshot of that original manila envelope page, my name underlined next to the house description, dated years before she got sick. "When I was 16, I narrated, Grandma took me to her lawyer. She told me she wanted the house to go to the person who lived with her, who shoveled snow, who took her to appointments. She documented that." Another click. A text thread popped up, names and dates visible, with Grandma joking about charging admission for will changes. "People treat me like a prize machine," her bubble read. "I'm not an ATM with arthritis." A few relatives chuckled, then immediately stopped when they realized this wasn't a highlight reel. Next slide. The tax notice, with the date of transfer highlighted. "This letter showed up a few months after the funeral," I said. "It says the house was transferred into Marissa's name while Grandma was still alive." I didn't look at Marissa. I didn't need to. I could feel the heat of her stare on the side of my face. Another click. The scanned quitclaim deed filled the screen, with the transfer date and the $10 consideration circled in red. "This is the document that moved the house into Marissa's name for $10, I said calmly. "It says Grandma signed it at home with a mobile notary present." I took a breath, then pressed the button that brought up the hospital chart from the same day. The hospital record slide was not pretty. It was just a screenshot of a scanned nurse's note full of abbreviations and timestamps. I'd highlighted one section in yellow. "Patient confused, disoriented, high fall risk, oriented to person only, not safe to sign own discharge documents." This was written on the same day the deed says Grandma was sitting at home, lucid enough to sign away her house in front of a notary, I said. According to the medical staff, she wasn't even allowed to sign herself out of the hospital. A ripple went through the crowd. Chairs creaked. Someone swore under their breath. From my left, Marissa's voice finally cut in, sharp and high. "You don't understand how this stuff works," she snapped. "Maybe the dates are off. Paperwork gets mixed up. You're making it sound like I did something illegal." I kept my eyes on the screen. Next slide. My email to the family asking for a copy of the will and their responses, side by side. "Why are you doing this?" "You're stirring up drama." "I don't have anything. The lawyer handled it." "I asked for a copy of Grandma's will," I said. "No one sent it. The lawyer's office said they couldn't release anything without the executor's permission. The executor is Marissa." I finally turned to look at her. "If this is all exactly how Grandma wanted it," I said calmly, "why has it been so hard to show me the paperwork?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, eyes darting to Aunt Carol, to my parents, to anyone who might jump in. The next slide wasn't a document. It was a side-by-side of Marissa's Instagram posts. "Demo day at Grandma's," time-stamped while Grandma was still hospitalized, right next to the nurse's note about her condition. The caption, "Finally making this place my own. She'd be so proud." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just let the silence and the contrast do the heavy lifting. "I took all of this to an independent probate attorney," I said. "She believes there's enough here to challenge the deed and the will, and to open a formal investigation into how this transfer happened." I clicked to the final slide, a simple list of next steps. Formal demand letter already drafted. Option to file in court. potential to freeze any further transactions involving this property. I wanted you all to see what I see, I finished. Not gossip. Not drama. Just facts. For a moment after I stopped talking, no one said anything. The only sound was the bug zapper in the corner and someone's uncle clearing his throat too loudly. Then the voices came, all at once. My mother asking, "Why didn't you tell us you went to a lawyer?" Aunt Carol insisting, "Mum would never have wanted this kind of spectacle." A cousin muttering, $10? Are you kidding me? Marissa kept saying the same phrase over and over, like a glitching audio track. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convert anyone in that moment. I'd already done what I came to do. Pull the story out of the shadows and staple it to the wall where everyone could see it. Here's what's going to happen next, I said, once the noise dipped enough for my voice to slide back in. Tomorrow, my attorney is sending a formal letter to Mr. Klein and to the county, challenging the deed and requesting that any sale or refinance be put on hold until this is resolved. I let that sink in, then added, "If any of you want copies of the documents I showed tonight, I'll email them. If you don't, that's fine. But I'm done pretending this is just a misunderstanding." My dad started to say something about keeping this in the family. I cut him off gently. "The minute you all decided to sign things in secret and lie about timelines, you took it out of the family-only category," I said. "I'm just catching up." I unplugged the flash drive, slipped it back into my pocket, and walked away from the TV. Behind me, the patio lights glowed on, like nothing had changed. In reality, everything had. The weeks that followed were exactly what you'd expect. Angry group chats, relatives choosing sides, passive-aggressive Facebook posts about some people forgetting where they come from. Angela sent the letters. The county flagged the property. Any attempt to sell, refinance, or transfer it again now had a big red "review required" tag on it. Quietly, without a slideshow, consequences started to unfold. It didn't turn into some dramatic, made-for-TV trial. Most real justice stories don't. They happen in letters, in conference rooms, in numbers, on a page finally being forced to make sense. About 6 months after the reunion, Angela called me with an update. "They don't want this in court," she said. "We've negotiated a settlement." The agreement wasn't perfect. It rarely is. But the house was no longer a $10 magic trick. The deed was corrected. I received the share Grandma had intended, plus a formal acknowledgement that the previous transfer had procedural issues. Marissa kept the house, technically, but not as a spotless fairy tale. There was a paper trail now that didn't paint her as the selfless hero she'd branded herself as. Some relatives stopped visiting. Others stopped believing her version of events so easily. As for me, I moved into a small place I could actually afford without waiting for anyone's permission. I paid off a chunk of my student loans. I bought a second-hand couch that didn't sag in the middle. I put a photo of Grandma on a shelf, not as a saint, but as a complicated person who loved me, and who tried, in her own way, to protect me. People sometimes ask if I regret blowing up the family reunion. They act like the problem was the night I pressed play, not the year before, when everyone decided I didn't need to know the truth. I don't regret it. I didn't punish anyone. I just stopped protecting their version of the story at the expense of my own sanity. If you're listening to this, and some part of you is thinking, "That sounds like my family," here's what I'll say. You don't have to turn your life into a courtroom, but you also don't have to accept being erased quietly. Write things down. Save the emails. Take screenshots. Don't let anyone convince you that asking for clarity makes you greedy or ungrateful. Inheritance doesn't just mean money or houses. It also means the story people tell about you when you're not in the room. I couldn't control what my family did after my grandmother died. But I could control whether I let their version be the only one that survived. That night at the reunion, I didn't just expose a stolen inheritance. I reclaimed my place in the story.